Hi, Mark.
You're no live, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee being held on Tuesday, the 12th of December 2023. For those present in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. If you're remote, then you make your own fire escape arrangements. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. For participants in the room, please use the microphones to speak, pressing the button on the right of the unit, and speak directly into the microphone. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. For those in attendance as virtual participants, can I request that they use the raise hand function within the system if they wish to contribute and to introduce themselves when they are called upon. First of all, apologies for absence. Mark has submitted his apologies.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Woodall is on MS Teams, but he will not be allowed to vote. There's been a no apologies, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Name substitutes, not necessary on this meeting. Declarations of interest. Are there any interest to declare? I see none. Item 4, minutes. Purposes to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 24th of October. These are included in the agenda. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. So are you content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 5, there are no questions received from members of the public. And item 6, no questions have been received from councillors either. So we move on straight away to the substantive items on this agenda. Number 7 is annual review of the Council's information requests and complaints. The purpose is to inform the Committee of performance in the areas of compliance. Data incidents and requests made to the Council over the municipal year 22-23. And Helen Worth is here to present part, and Tilly Page the other part. So I think, if I may, I don't know whether, Helen, you want to make an overall introduction, or Tilly, or yes, or you're dealing with requests for information, FOI anyway. So I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So overall, the report is around sort of 6 months out of date, unfortunately, due to it ending April this year and us attending later on due to you being very busy, I understand, with lots of other matters. So it is slightly out of date, but it sort of paints a picture of the volume of FOI and EIR requests that we receive and the volume of subject access requests that we receive. Up until April, we hadn't seen much difference compared to the previous years. However, since April, what the report doesn't highlight is that we have seen a reduction in the number of freedom of information requests and subject access, and we have seen an increase in the number of subject access requests. So we have seen some coming down and some going up, which just means that as a team we sort of flex our priorities and get staff working in different areas. For freedom of information requests, we're not always able to identify where the requester is from. So they could be media, and we may be able to identify that by the email address. They could just be a member of the public interested in a particular area of information. It could be that they have an interest in planning, an interest in environment, or it could be that we have a certain issue or a certain recommendation within the council project that's being launched, and they want to find out further information about that. So we do see lots of different requests coming in for sometimes weird and wonderful bits of information from various sources, really.
Helen, can you broadly explain the process when a request comes in?
Yes, so the request comes into the organisation. My team will log it and acknowledge it within 5 working days. We will then identify what the requester is looking for, and we identify which team or department within the council holds that information. We will then send that team a request for the information that they hold, and we give them usually 15 working days to get that back to us. And then when they've sent it back to us, we then review the information and consider any exemptions that we need to apply and any redaction that needs to take place within those documents, and, you know, pull a response together and send it out once it's all been signed off.
I've always thought it's quite a extensive exercise and very time consuming, and really in a business context it potentially disrupts a business doing this. We obviously have to do it, but what's your kind of reflection on that?
We have over the last few years tried to tweak our process and our procedures and streamline it as much as possible. So when a request comes into my team, they will check and see, have we responded to something like this before? Do we already hold the information in our team? Is it publicly available somewhere? You know, so can we actually direct the requester back to a website or a link somewhere where they can access the information? And we'll always try and make it as easy as possible for the service to identify what the request is asking for. So if we feel at the point of the request coming in, it's not quite clear, rather than send it to the service area, we go straight back to the requester and ask for that clarification. And we give them as much time as we possibly can to gather the information together. We actually sometimes leave ourselves short. As you could probably imagine, when we're talking about planning applications or environmental issues that have lots of emails and documents around them, then we sometimes have a lot of information to consider for redaction and exemptions. We are also now trying to pick up requests as business as usual rather than logging them as an FOI or an EIR, and to save that going into the service area. If we know that we can answer it quite quickly, or we know that the information's already on the website, we won't log it as an FOI and we'll do it as business as usual.
Great, thank you very much. Robert.
Yeah, do you have a Q&A either within your department or publicly, so that people can look first, or for you to refer to see if you've already answered something similar to that before? Do you have something like that?
We do. We have a disclosure log on the website. So the requester can search that first and find out all of the responses that we've published since January 2022. So it's nearly been going 2 years now. And we do have frequently asked questions as well that suggests what we may not respond to based on our previous responses. So we try to help them as much as possible to refine their request to something that we can answer rather than something that we can't answer, or something that's going to take too much time and then we end up refusing. So, yeah.
It was one of my problems is that the search engine on the council website is very poor. And if you do a search there, it's obviously much better to go by subject and try and find it directly. But if you use the search engine, you will not find what you're looking for. So I wonder how they search for answers. If they may well be there, but how are they going to find them?
So the disclosure log itself is all in one place. It's on the same page as where you would submit a Freedom of Information request from, and it says clearly, check our disclosure log, check the frequently asked questions, and then the disclosure log can be used. You can search any key term on that and it will pull back all of the answers. So it's possibly just knowing where to go rather than going straight to the website and then searching straight from the website itself. It's about going down into the Freedom of Information page that tells you how to make a request and then searching from there.
Any other questions?
I would like to say you've perfectly answered the question I was about to ask. Thank you, Robert.
Any other comments on that section of the report? See none. I think then we'll move on to complaints. Tilly, your bit.
Thank you, Chair. The
report shows an increase in complaints. Now, this could be interpreted negatively, that we are receiving a number of complaints. What I'd like to share is that actually I think the complaints procedure's been made much more accessible to the public and particularly children and families. So although we've had an increase in the number of complaints, I do think it's because people feel they can complain, they will be listened to and their concerns will be resolved. You'll see that the complaints are split into children's complaints and corporate complaints. So corporate complaints cover all directorates within the council, including children's services. However, this is limited to assessments, child protection processes, and any documents being produced for court. Anything else relating to children's services and anything affecting children directly goes under the children's statutory complaints policy. This is a government policy that has 3 stages, and it's run very differently to the corporate policy. As I say, the numbers have gone up. I don't think it's a negative thing. We are able to resolve a lot more in-house, working with the services. We have lots of mediation meetings with complainants and give them an opportunity to come in and talk to us and understand a little bit more about our services, decisions that are made.
Okay, so yes, Tilly. I mean, you've in a way you've preempted my concern on paragraph 19. It refers to the last 6 months. You know, children's complaints going up. That is a cause of concern. Should we be particularly concerned about that? Do you think?
I don't think we should be particularly concerned about it. The way that you assess a complaint has changed. So the LGSEO, the Government Ombudsman, give us a guidance on how to assess a complaint that comes in for children's services. That's been made a lot clearer. So a complaint can be processed through the right policy. So although there is an increase in the number of children's complaints being processed, that is because they're being put through the right policy. And again, as I said earlier, I do think that comes down to families and children feeling like we are going to listen to them and try and resolve some of their complaints for them. And we've made the process much more accessible.
Frank.
So,
And then Peter.
just to clarify, does a complaint start when a person says on the other end of the line or on an email, I wish to make a complaint, rather than just to question the council over any policy?
Yes, so assuming that the member of the public comes into us, we always assume they want to make a complaint. What my team do is make contact with that complainant first to understand if there's anything we could do informally to try and resolve that for them. So if they're trying to get in contact with somebody or they're after a piece of information, can we resolve that for them without them having to go through the formal process? However, yes, what we say as rule of thumb is if you would like to make a formal complaint and that's been shared with the service area perhaps and not us, then it should be sent to us, and as everybody has a right to complain.
Okay, I'll go to Mark next, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Are you receiving me?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tilly, for the report. Do you have any concerns about the number of escalations of cases to the LGSEO? So just to give you some context, in the last 12 months, because they've got a log that you've kindly put into your report, I saw there were 35 cases escalated to the LGO, and they incurred us, we had to pay fines of up to £900 on those. So obviously when things get escalated to that level, there's a bit of a concern. Are you worried about the increasing level of items that are being escalated? Not whether they've been upheld or not upheld, just the fact that they've gone up to the LGSEO. Is there something that you're looking into there to mitigate that or to reduce that occurrence?
I have a responsibility to let everybody know of their rights to complain. So corporate complaints, for example, once they've been investigated, if they're still not happy with the response, they have a right to go to the Ombudsman. So I think perhaps the increase is because we are making people more aware of their rights to escalate their complaints. I'm not overly concerned because as I say, I think people are, where we're trying to resolve things early on, we can't always do that. We do have persistent complainants who tend to complain about the same thing. So we don't accept every complaint that comes in, because it may be that we've already investigated. At that point, they do go to the Ombudsman. And as I say, because there is new guidance now, and we are trying to be a little bit more rigorous in implementing both the policies and the guidance, we're not accepting as many complaints if they've already been looked into, but the complainant hasn't accepted the response. So we are directing them to the Ombudsman, as that is the correct thing to be doing.
Okay, thank you. I've got a follow-up on that. Then for the child protection complainants,
Yeah.
or care and child protection, let's say if we put them together, is there an opportunity for a third party like lead counsel, for example, to be involved at all in reviewing those complaints?
Absolutely. So a corporate complaint, once they've had a response, the complainant is entitled to request a review of the response and of the complaint and a further investigation. They can request for that to be done by an independent person, whether that be Leeds or somebody in the council, or whether we commission independent people. We do work with lots of independent people, that, particularly with children's services, that look into complaints, mainly at stage 2, but for example, if lots of professionals have been involved at stage 1, it may be most appropriate that we commission somebody else to look at that independently. And again, that's in a way of trying to resolve the complaint for the complainants. They feel like they've been really heard and listened to, and their concerns have been looked into effectively.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Robert?
Yes, first of all, a comment. As an ex-police officer, we knew that if complaints went up, it was because we were doing our job better. So I'm not so worried about the numbers. Each case has to be taken on its merits. But you mentioned informal resolution. Do you have an actual laid down procedure for informal resolution, or is it very informal?
We don't have a laid down procedure for it necessarily, and it depends on the service area. If I use economy and environment, for example, sometimes they're service requests. So we get lots of complaints about bins not being collected. So if people have moved, there might be a different bin collection day, and we just look that information up for them and let the complainant know. Children's services, for example, sometimes people come through to us because they may not be able to get hold of a social worker, and we just try and put them in touch with the social worker or the team manager and arrange a meeting for them. So not so much a process, but we do try and resolve as much as we can.
In my organisation, we dealt with over 90% of complaints were resolved by informal resolution, but there was a formal process that had to be followed for that. You didn't just make up each one case by case. And I wonder if there's any value in establishing a clear procedure to be followed in respect of informal resolution, which could spread actually to many other areas of the council, not just complaints. There's things to do with planning enforcement, things like that. Just as a comment. Perhaps you can think about that. And if you want, I can give you an example of the procedures that we had to follow and see if you think it would be useful to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Robert, how do you want to take that forward?
Well, I think Tilly's going to think about it, and if she's interested in pursuing it, I'm not going to lay any expectation on her, but if she's interested in following it any further, I can give her examples of formal procedure and see whether you think it would be helpful. So just leave it at that, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions? So Tilly, in 13, it refers to quarterly reports to directorate management teams and the ongoing learning. And I guess I'm encouraged that there's regular updates to the senior management in the council about complaints. It's not, and it's just not presented as these are complaints. There's actually an opportunity to change and improve. I don't know whether you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, so learning from complaints is something that hasn't historically been taken overly seriously. Is something that our current CLT are looking at and really implementing throughout the service areas. It is an expectation that if you are responding to a complaint, that there's some learning to take from that. There is a reason somebody has complained, even if we are not at fault. There is something has happened for that person to feel they need to make a complaint. There's always learning to take. The lessons learned are sent back into the complaint service. We collate all those, and as it says at point 13, we report those back to CLT, and they share that with the services, and they take that into their own team meetings, service days, and implement that learning.
Okay, so the last section is about information governance. Helen, is this your cup of tea? What I've discovered is that if you're speaking and the light's on, you're on the television. So if you want to make sure you're not on it, you.
Yeah, thank you. So the last section just covers off that we also, my team's also responsible for investigating data breaches and risk assessing them and advising on service areas of, how to ensure that they don't happen again. We did have an audit from the ICO a few years ago now, and their response was that they are not concerned, as we've sort of already highlighted yourself, Councillor Highfield, that they're not concerned about the numbers being reported, because that shows a really good awareness throughout the authority that staff understand what a data breach is and report them to us. It's about us identifying patterns of where things keep going wrong and seeing if we can put any technical measures in place to stop it, or offer training to staff to help them understand ways in which we could do things better. So that's, and again, it's just a small chunk of our role, but yeah, we like going out to teams and spending time with them and understanding what their role is and what they do, what's gone wrong, and helping them to put things right again.
So Helen, there are 210 cases were reported. So those are data breaches. Strikes me as being a high number. You're saying to me we needn't be concerned about that. Can you give a sort of example of something?
Yeah,
something like that.
We'll say that there's 210 data incidents reported, and then we assess them as to whether actually a breach of the Data Protection Act has occurred. And in not all of those cases has a breach occurred. An example of what can sometimes go wrong is that we send an email to the wrong recipient, but that wrong recipient can often be another person within the council, or it could be a colleague at Wye Valley Trust. And those recipients are classed as trusted professionals. So they complete their own training, and they have to comply with confidentiality standards as part of their role. So the ICO views them as trusted professionals, and therefore the risk of us inappropriately accidentally sending an email to the wrong place is very, very low. Sometimes it might just have the initials of someone in the body of the email. We're not actually oversharing lots of information. But then we could go to the other extent would be where somebody loses their laptop, somebody loses a mobile phone. We accidentally share social care data with somebody that shouldn't have it, which can then put children and families at risk. So there's lots that come in. The majority of them are emails sent to the wrong recipient or posts sent to the wrong address. And that's down to human error a lot of the time.
Okay, I'm sure we've all done that at some point in time. Thank you. I think that one of the points is if you have lots of little ones which are the same, that indicates a problem. But if there's one really big one, then it's not systemic, is it? It's
No, and we are moving across. So technically, we're moving across to Office 365, within the next year, and that will mean that we no longer share our email address book with Wye Valley Trust and Hoople and other colleagues, where it's been very easy in the past to select the wrong person from the address book and send the email across to them, because we've shared that email domain. So that should reduce that risk down quite a lot. We should see less of those incidents occurring.
great. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Helen. Helen, could you just clarify for me, are you only just talking about data breaches out of Hereford Council from us? Or what about data breaches incoming that, someone sends a phishing email or something like that? Do you also sort of watch out for those?
Yeah, We do. So information security is, so the phishing emails coming in are a big risk to the organisation. So yeah, it's our team's responsibility to raise awareness around those. Don't open attachments or click on links unless you're expecting to receive it. We understand that can be really difficult if you work in a finance department and something comes in and says, here's an invoice. They deal with those sorts of things every day. So that is part of my team's responsibility to raise awareness and also identify where individuals have clicked on links or have opened attachments. And again, identify repeat offenders. So we do sometimes do exercises where we'll do a spoof phishing test and just see, how many staff click on it, and then we can go back to them and understand what made them click on it. Sometimes we sort of say, if it sounds too good to be true, it often is. We use that sort of message. So yeah, we do look at those. We also look at data breaches that are caused as a result or by somebody commissioned to provide a service on behalf of the council, because 9 times out of 10 they are a data processor for us. So we'll also investigate those types of breaches.
Okay, and are you checking to make sure our suppliers also have a similar level of control, let's say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we check that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, because it only takes one person to click on the link to actually, bring down an entire network. And what's your target? I mean, do you have you said you do some testing, so you can send out a dummy message to everybody, and you find out 20% of people are clicking on it, 10% of people are clicking on it. Are you trying to move that needle down? Have you got targets for moving that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we haven't ever set a target as such that we'd like to achieve. We're just always looking for it to be less than, the last time. I think the highest number we had was 6% of staff that it was sent to clicked on it. And actually we were still we still felt that was too high. So we went back out and did some more sort of reminders and spoke to those people individually to find out, what enticed them on this particular occasion to click on the link. And it's about changing the way as well, because, we've seen it from, HMRC are offering you a tax refund to your deliveries ready to be delivered, your parcels ready to be delivered. They just get very clever, very clever.
Okay, but your goal is, I suppose, then to get to 0%.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, we've done
that would be the goal.
Yeah, it would be the goal, but whether we can realistically ever get there, we'd love to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could you just indicate to us what would count as a complaint which meets the threshold for reporting to the Information Commissioner's Office?
Yeah, so we will risk assess it. So, and this is based on the Information Commissioner's guidance. So it depends on the number of people that are involved. Normally, if it involves over 10 data subjects, then that's the first starting point, and then it relies on the information that's involved as well and the sensitivity of that data. So that's how we form our risk assessment, and then we score it, and if it reaches a scoring of 2 or above, then we will review it with the CSIRO and consider reporting to the Information Commissioner's Office. If it scores anything under a 2, which is normally, it could be less, it could be one person's affected but the data's sensitive, or it could be 5 people are affected and the data's non-sensitive, they could score under a 2. So yeah, it depends how it scores.
So that is policed internally, and it sounds like there aren't very many. So
there aren't very many, and the ones that we have reported to the ICO over the last 12 months, the ICO have been pleased with the actions that we've taken, and they've considered that there's no further action required from themselves.
Robert.
Yeah, where is our data stored?
On the council's network, which has a data centre here at Plough Lane. And a second one?
And a second one, a backup?
Yes.
In a separate site?
Yes.
Not connected?
No.
Not in the same building?
No.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Great. Okay. So thanks for this. Sean, this, strictly speaking, doesn't appear within our terms of reference for this committee. I think it might be helpful if you were to take away either we continue to have this review and the terms of reference are amended to include this, or some alternative arrangement is put in place. I think it's been really informative for us to have this report, so it needs certainly to be presented somewhere within the council, within, if I like, the political sphere, so either cabinet or ourselves or scrutiny committee. Perhaps you might just take that away.
Yeah, more than happy to do that, Chair. Obviously, office officers, we're listening and we're watching the debate. I'll take that back to the monitoring officer, have a discussion with herself and you in relation to where this sits and whether or not it should sit back with this committee. But certainly, what I've heard is that some aspects of what we're discussing align with what this committee has been tasked to do. So I'll be happy to feed back to you directly. Outside of the official meeting schedule.
Yes, I think it's about risk to the council, isn't it? In all sorts of ways. So it covers that, but when it gets into the detail in children's, then I think something like the report on children's needs to go to probably Children's Scrutiny Committee. But I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. Yeah, I think you're right that the detail behind it and the diving to what's happened certainly needs to sit either with the officers or the various scrutiny committee. What I'm hearing is that you want to see that the fact that this has been done and have feedback on trends, performance, that type of thing, which does seem to align with some of the other terms of reference which this has been placed with this. But I'll go speak to the monitoring officer and I'll come back to you and I'll let the committee know what the views are and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Is that okay with the rest of the committee? Thank you very much. So move on then to item 8, update on internal audit recommendations. Kevin, are you with us? Yes.
I am.
Okay, hello. Yeah, Kevin, do you want to just introduce the topic?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So the report before you presents an update on the progress made in responding to recommendations made by SWAP, our internal auditors, in their audit reports which have been issued before September 23. It's split into 3 sections. Those recommendations previously reported to committee as incomplete. Those recommendations due between April 2023 and September 2023. And then those recommendations that have become due since the end of September. Updates on all the recommendations can be found in the appendix. Apologies for the length of that appendix. It's dictated by the number of recommendations that are in the system at the moment. So just covering the report very quickly. Of the 34 recommendations that were previously overdue, in paragraph 8, only 21% or 7 recommendations have since been completed, 1 deferred and 26 remain outstanding. Of those that are due in period, 62% or 21 of the 34 recommendations are reported as complete, and that's in paragraph 9. And this compares to 47% when last reported to committee 6 months ago. Whilst it's positive to see that the proportion of recommendations being actioned within period is improving, there are 13 that haven't been completed to schedule in this period, and these will be added to the 26 that were previously overdue and reported as still outstanding in paragraph 8, meaning that the actual number of recommendations reported as overdue when next reported has increased. So on that note, I'll say the coming months will focus on ensuring that those historical recommendations are acted on, or at least there's a statement to committee within this report to the effect that changes have taken place within the service that mean those recommendations are no longer relevant. Moving forward, in the SWAP audits that take place now and in the future, I'd suggest that greater consideration should be given to the setting of a target date for completion before the audit is finalised, so the report issued is less likely to lead to dates being missed in the future. Final note, of the 3 recommendations in paragraph 3 future recommendations in paragraph 11, all are currently complete or on track. So it should be noted that previous forecasts have been reasonably accurate when we've reported on the future recommendations. So I see no reason why they can't be reported as complete when we come back in 6 months' time. Questions, Chair?
Thank you very much, Kevin. Over to any members of the committee at the moment, or shall I kick off? No, I don't want to kick off, but you want to? Anybody else want to start? Frank, and then Aubrey.
So in paragraph 10, and to give a percentage of 62% have been completed. My only question is, are you considering that that is now a good percent, and how does that reflect generally?
Yeah, Kevin.
Is it a good percentage? Well, it's better than it's been before. My personal opinion, it needs to be higher. Obviously, I think we should be looking at 100% ideally. It's to the services to set the target dates and agree with SWAP and deliver against it. But it is an improving picture in that area. So I think the trend is positive there. As I've reflected, I think the focus needs to be on those historical recommendations. So that will lessen the number of recommendations that are still outstanding.
Aubrey. Aubrey, did you want to take up on anything on this?
Yeah, thank you. In respect to the ongoing questions about the Green Homes grant, have you a figure for the unspent funding that has to be refunded to government as at the 23rd of March 2022? And what is the position to date? Is there any reason why we've been unable to, as a council, to spend this money within the council and the time provided?
Unfortunately, Councillor, I'm not in a position to comment on each of the recommendations within the report, but I'll note your question and I'll ensure that there's an answer provided from within the service, if that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, but you know, as this is a fairly important grant, and the the recommendations made by the auditors, internal auditors, are we now complete with the recommendations they've made? It's listed as in progress, but have we actually met all the recommendations they made in regard to the Green Homes grant?
What the recommendations made by SWAP?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think this one is still outstanding, and I'll go back to the service and get you an update. And outside of that update, it will still be reported to committee in 6 months' time, because it's still an outstanding recommendation. But prior to that report, I'll get you a briefing paper prepared to give an update.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I've got a few points, which I think you're almost recommending this yourself, Kevin, from what you were saying earlier. Internal audit needs to be dealt with seriously, and there are a disappointing number of recommendations where it seems to be kicked down the road time after time after time. There may be all sorts of reasons for that, but I suppose my challenge is to ask that, having kicked them down the road so many times, are they still relevant now? Are there some here which we're looking at, and really there's no point in actually looking at some of these because time has just moved on, and it would be a bit of a waste of officers' time to be following through on these recommendations. That would require cooperation, obviously, between SWAP, who need to look and see whether dropping that particular item was appropriate, and working with the Section 151 officer to make sure that happens. The other, so I think my request would be that this list be looked at to see what needs to be continued, and if there's anything which could be dropped at the moment, but with an explanation, please. The other element is that whenever recommendations are made to do it by a particular date, that these dates are realistic. Now, I think from what you're saying, Kevin, that they are becoming much more realistic. Your comment about the older ones are the ones which are still behind time, whereas the more recent recommendations have been followed through more quickly. So I think probably your observations on that, if you can just confirm that the more recent ones are being followed through more quickly, so you're happy with that, that doesn't need to be looked at. But I'm just a bit concerned about the time consumed on the older ones, particularly in an environment where our own resources are going to be stretched in the future. We need to be making sure we use our resources properly in the right areas. So hopefully you understand what I'm going on about there, Kevin.
I think I do, Councillor. I'm sure it'd be adequately recorded by committee services in the notes. But yes, I think I intend following up with all the services that have got incomplete recommendations to establish whether or not that recommendation is still live and worth completing. And as you've identified, and if it isn't, a statement to that effect and agreement between ourselves and SWAP that they're happy that that comes off the list. That will certainly be done over the next 6 months and reported back to committee in the next report.
Kevin, the other thing about more recent items that have been put on the list, I think they're being dealt with more quickly. Is that a fair comment?
They would certainly appear to be dealt with more quickly. I think we've changed the process recently, so any recommendations made by SWAP, we try and include them in service business plans, so they're monitored on a monthly basis, and we collect the updates every 3 months to report into directorate leadership team. So I think that's becoming more efficient. I think there were circumstances over the last 3 or 4 years where I wouldn't necessarily say we were unrealistic with target setting in the initial audits. I think circumstances of taking our eye off the ball, such as the pandemic, which have led to various delays, and we haven't been smart enough in coming up with a revised target date, shall I say.
Thank you for that, Kevin. Mark, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kevin. On the appendix, you've got the columns there. Could you just explain who sets the priority on the column? It probably was in there, but if you could just remind us.
Yeah, the priorities are set by, well, as far as I'm aware, they're set by SWAP. Whether or not, I can't hand on heart tell you that the council has an opportunity to negotiate the priority, shall we say, but priority 1 are the most important, priority 2,
yeah,
the next level, priority 3, but it's following SWAP's process, so they're not our priority, but it's SWAP that's setting priorities.
Okay, because there might be an opportunity, to get an agreed priority with the department will focus their attention. So if, parking or child's process, they agree the priority with SWAP, then they're part of that decision, aren't they? And the other thing is the target date. So as David was saying, it's disappointing to see that some of them have been pushed down the lane, 7 times they've been postponed. But if the priority is quite low on those, then maybe it is time, as you say, to review whether those are necessary. But where it's a priority 1, that should be, what do you do, with a priority 1 that's different from a priority 2? How do you handle that differently when you're pursuing completion?
I'll be honest, I don't differentiate between the priorities. I think they're all recommendations that have been made by SWAP and agreed by our services. So on that basis, they should be being delivered. So I target all priorities equally. What I will say is the priority 1 and 2s, so priority 3s aren't top of the list, and SWAP will rely on us to get those delivered. The priority 1s and 2s will form part of a SWAP follow-up report sometime in the future after that audit's done. So they will go back and do their own checks to ensure that those have been delivered as well.
Okay.
But I think you're quite right, and I think Okay, they are priority one, which is the most important, but I view them all equally important because we've agreed to do them. And the follow-up process that I'm going to do over the next 3 months before the next 6 monthly report is due is get firm commitment from the services as to actually delivering against what they've agreed, or negotiating with swap that's no longer relevant. And that may apply to priority ones as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Just a follow up then. I mean, it is, as Dave was saying, the resources are stripped back. So prioritization is what helps everybody, isn't it? It helps everybody to get things done. So maybe, figuring out how to get the stakeholders involved with the priority ones and agreeing to getting those done will help move those forward. I think there should be some differentiation between priority, otherwise there's no point in having it.
Okay, accepted.
Thank you, Mark. Jenny, we need to note some sort of action point on that last one, I think.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you'd like to put a recommendation forward that all historic recommendations to be reviewed by relevant service areas and swap to see if they are still relevant.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And there be some differentiation between priorities 1 and 2. So the recommendation is that the status of the current audit recommendations is reviewed, which we've done. We determine any recommendations, those 2 we have mentioned, in order to provide further assurance that actions identified by audit activity are being actively managed. I have a question before we put that to the vote, Robert.
Yeah, just to emphasise, I can't agree with Kevin's approach that he doesn't treat the different priorities with any difference. What's the point of having a priority if you don't treat 1s and 2s more seriously and more urgently than 3s, for example?
Kevin, I think you've taken that on board from what I've seen. You've taken a note of it. Thank you. So put that recommendation to the panel, to the board. Are all those in favour? Thank you. Kevin, thank you very much. You may depart.
Thank you.
And I'm afraid I didn't put the recommendation of number 7 to the panel either. So it's just for noting that we are asking Sean to go away and assess where it should sit in the future. And I think with that also, Helen and Tilly, if you want to go, you can, or you can stay if you wish. Okay, thank you. Thank you for waiting patiently while we dealt with the next item. Okay, so item 9, energy from waste loan update. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide assurance to this committee over the administration of the loan that the council has with Mercia Waste and compliance of the borrower with the financial covenants that are embedded within the loan agreement. So by way of background, the council currently acts as lender jointly with Worcestershire County Council to Mercia Waste Management Limited. The loan was used to buy and operate an energy from waste plant that is over in Hartlebury and in Worcestershire, and that asset is used to recycle and recover energy from waste collected across the 2 counties. This report confirms that the repayments have been made by the borrower in line with the loan agreement, and also confirms for the financial covenants in place that they have been met. Those financial covenants look at the position and performance of the borrower and provide assurance over the risk of their ability to meet future debt repayments. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. There are big numbers here. Anybody want to ask the first question? Peter.
I'm more than happy with the figures in the little table on the left, but on paragraph 9, could you provide some sort of layman's explanations of what those ratios really mean?
Okay.
Okay, so I think there's some clarity in the calculation column of that table. So the historic annual debt service cover ratio, so that is looking at the previous 12 months cash flows of the borrower, the company in question, and that confirms that they were able at each point in terms of their cash flow in each reporting month to meet their debt repayments in that month. And then the next one is a future look, so standing at the date of compliance, so the date that these certificates are prepared and reviewed for us, looking ahead for the next 12 months and looking at the company's cash flow forecasts, their audited balance sheet, and making sure that there are sufficient funds, resources available within that company to meet their debt repayments. And finally, the loan life cover ratio confirms that there is sufficient cash flow to meet the terms of the loan over the remaining, the length of the loan agreement.
Are these all things that can be extracted from this company's accounts? I can't see how the arithmetic works. I'm not looking for lots of detail, but just perhaps some indication of how one of them might be built up into its 1.35 compliance value and its actual value.
So there are some detailed calculations that sit behind our assessment of compliance, and there are a number of working papers underneath that. Some of that information will be available in those companies' accounts, but in terms of cash flow, that's not something that's reported on a monthly basis in a set of published or audited accounts. That's information provided to us as part of the requirements of our agreement with Mercia Waste Limited.
Frank.
Thank you, Rachel. So could you just briefly explain the difference between a compliance value and an actual value at June 2023, just so as we completely understand?
My understanding is that the compliance value is that set within the loan agreement, the value that we are expecting them to meet, and the actual value is how they've performed on the date that this was tested.
Aubrey.
Thank you. Could you confirm that the balance of 29.7 million is on course to be repaid by January 2029? Because the repayments in the last year were only 2.1 million. Are they going to up their repayments to make this deadline?
I can't confirm that the loan repayment will be made. What I can confirm is the terms and conditions of the loan agreement, and provide assurance through this mechanism that they are currently meeting the conditions within that loan. So the current loan agreement provides for the repayment of the outstanding balance in full in January 2029, and that's via a bullet payment in January 2029 for the remaining balance.
And I guess, Rachel, these compliance ratios have been set some time ago, probably by a previous committee, based on advice that's been received by the committee at that time.
We've had a review in the last 12 months of the loan agreement by an external body, and that has included a review of these conditions that are attached and the compliance ratios.
No, that was a much better reply than I was expecting. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? Everybody fairly comfortable where fulfilling our obligations is? Thank you, Rachel. So the recommendation is to update, where you recommend that you've updated the committee on the current status and have enabled the committee to fulfill its delegated functions. All happy with that? All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 10, amendments to the Code of Conduct reporting process. Sean, this is your opportunity to
Thank you,
present.
Chair. This is a report from recommended changes to the Code of Conduct arrangements. In particular, the way that members of the Standards Panel are made aware of decisions made by the monitoring officer and officers. The proposal is mainly there to improve visibility and timeliness of member feedback, and making much more useful to the officers and the monitoring officer. Chair, I've got a few slides that might assist kind of talking through the changes in the actual paper. So the main bulk of the change is in relation to oversight of decisions made other than by the standards panel. So officers had reviewed the current process that's within the Constitution and decided that we understood the principles behind it, and we thought that was good. Ensuring the members were fully involved with those decisions and they had the oversight there. What we didn't quite understand was the methodology of the process, and we thought, well, and the reason why we're here is because we thought we could come up with a better way of doing it. So in front of you there is the current process. So there's two panels. The standards panel, which does a dip sampling, either depending on which part of the Constitution you look at, either once a year or twice a year. And part of that dip sampling is looking at the detail behind a decision that was made by the monitoring officer. There's two issues with that, two main issues. It was 12 months too late than when the feedback could actually be useful, or 6 months too late. And essentially that was and the second point was that the dip sampling was actually chosen by the officers, so you kind of got to see what we wanted for you to see. So that was the standards panel. The audit and governance, that had a more of a overview, so looking at trends, the resourcing, that type of thing, ensuring that the actual processes was being conducted correctly. Next slide, please. So these are the officers' views on this. So as you can see, there's half a dozen statements which kind of state that what was negative about the process. The two main issues, again, was the feedback. We thought that was too late, and also the dip sampling. Again, you just get to see what we wanted you to see. It could have been done. It could have been done that way. So next slide, please. So what we're proposing in this part of the paper in relation to transparency is that the oversight is still there by the standards panel. The standards panel still gets to see the decisions, but the difference is that they get to see all decisions. So not just a dip sample of decisions. The panel gets to see all of them, and they are sent to the committee as soon as they are issued. So the committee will have them immediately. If there's any particular feedback, then that can be given back to officers immediately. That is a benefit to the officers, because we can understand whether or not our decision making is as per what members would expect. That also gives us valuable feedback on that. The second section was the audit and governance. So we're not proposing to change that significantly, other than that the frequency is increased. So at the moment it's once a year, and we're looking to do that once every 6 months. So you'll get 2 papers per year in relation to the frequency. Next slide, please. So these are the benefits that we envisage would be gained by, well, both by the officers and the members. So where you could say that actually the members' involvement in the current process is almost like a rubber stamping our decisions, because it's made so late in the day, it doesn't really have that much impact on what was done. You can actually give more focused feedback, which is more relevant, that's focused to the actual issue, and it can be done immediately. If the members have any particular questions, you don't have to wait for a particular meeting. You can just pick up the phone, send an email, ask a question on those points. If the members think there's a matter of concern, we can then start to call that meeting. We can call a meeting, and then we can discuss that in detail. Chair, before I move on to the second part, the consequential changes, is there any questions the panel have on the oversight by the standards panel, or what is proposed?
Peter.
My first thought, there having been in the standards panel, is that this is all good. I certainly approve.
Thank you, Peter. I think my own concern, only concern, Sean, would be that this will end up with actually you doing more work. It's good of you to come up with this proposal, which I think potentially places more of a burden on you. I don't know whether you want to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for thinking of our officers' well-being and the amount of work we have to do. We will monitor the situation, and if it does become particularly burdensome, you can bet your bottom dollar I'll be back here again, asking you to go back to where it was. Having looked at the time that has been spent on preparing for particular meetings, however, we think that actually this will be considerably less. Sharing the information with the members, it's just a simple case of sending an email. It's far easier just to have a conversation, an informal conversation, rather than an official meeting and preparing for an official meeting 6 months or a year after you actually dealt with the actual issues. But thank you for raising the point.
Yes, a part of the point there is after 12 months you do a summary of all the cases, don't you? And that must take quite a long time. So.
It does, Chair, especially trying to work out why something happened, why a particular person made a decision. As we found out last time, there was quite a lot of churn in officers, so we were second guessing why officers had actually made that particular decision or given that advice. So this way, the feedback, we want the feedback, and the feedback, if it can be given back immediately, that's considerably more helpful.
Okay, I think we move on. Mark, I can't see if you've got a hand raised. I presume not. No. Okay. Sean, carry on.
Okay, next slide. So a few consequential changes. So we're also proposing that the membership of the standards panel is fixed. So that is fixed at the start of each year. Through the 3 councillors, one the chair of this committee, plus 2 other councillors, and then plus the independent person and the parish council representative. That decision will be done on the first meeting of this committee. We've also added in some wording in relation to voting, so clarity that the voting at the standards panel, so the actual decision making on whether or not there is a breach or not, that is limited to the 3 councillors only. We kind of knew that, but we had feedback that might have been forgotten previously, or there wasn't so much clarity around that. So we've added some wording in, so it's clear that the decision makers are the three members of this council. The parish council representative is there to give their views, and so is independent person. So they're there to give their views and help the 3 councillors to make their decision. The final change is that currently the chair of that committee is the independent person, which slightly dilutes their role. They're there to help the panel to make the decision. We thought it would be better if the chair moves to one of the 3 members, and then the independent person can then do the role that they're supposed to do. Next slide.
We have to take a question in the middle, Frank.
As you just do, how do you select the parish councillor and how do you select the independent person?
So the independent person, we have 4 independent persons, and often it's generally done on who would be available for a particular panel. What we find, though, is that once a matter starts, we will then consult with the same independent person all the way through. So right from the start, when we first receive a complaint in, if it goes to a full standards hearing, it would be that same member. The benefits is that they've got a full understanding of what's happened and what advice has been given all the way along there. In relation to the parish councillor, that is a person nominated by HALC, so they will nominate a representative, and that is the person on the panel.
Yep, keep going, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. So 3 more slides, almost there. So this next slide is just this is a recommendation that we're asking for you to make to full council. We've adopted the LGA Code of Conduct, and we've recently been made aware of a High Court case that indicated that our code, as adopted, wasn't compliant with the common law, so it was more restrictive. So under our current code, you could end up with a result where a member isn't in breach of the code, even if they know that they are biased in a particular decision. So what we're trying to do is align our code with the law. So it's simply, the wording is in the paper, but it's simply adding the word "or" in the two different circumstances when that applies. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Yep.
It's interesting. How do you define bias? We're all biased in certain ways. How do we know that we're biased towards this particular decision?
Well, I think you've all got a particular predisposition for a particular state of affairs, and it would be for myself and the other members of this panel to convince you otherwise if they have a different views. But if you've all got the same predisposition, then I wouldn't call it a bias. It was just something that you're naturally predisposed to vote for. Thank you. So
Mark, do you want to ask a question now or wait till the very end?
I can wait to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the last two slides relate to the guidance which is published on the website. Now, this guidance was adopted by this committee, so we brought it back to this committee just to keep it consistent. We weren't clear whether or not we had authority to go and change this ourselves, but we thought it was, as we were bringing the other changes to you, that we would add this to this guidance. So what we're asking under the first set of bullet points there is that when we come to publishing details of breaches, that there's a clear timeline for how long that is actually published. At the moment, there's no guidance at all, and we're not entirely sure if it stays on for a week, a month, or forever. So what we're proposing is that the publication match is there until the member is no longer a councillor. The second bullet point is in relation to the types of breaches which are published. So currently it says that we only publish breaches, but our adopted process says that actually the monitoring officer can make a decision to publish other decisions, and has made other decisions recently. For example, there was a series of complaints with the parish council. In a parish council, there was 18 or 19 complaints, and the monitoring officer thought it was right to publish all those decisions for the public to have a full understanding of what was happening at that parish council, as opposed to, from those 18, there were actually only two breaches. The rest of them were not found in breach of the code. So the MO decided at that point it would have been to get a more rounded picture to publish all of those decisions. That is in our adopted arrangements, but it's not on the guidance note, which is published online. So we want to add in the wording to say that other decisions can be published by the MO in consultation with the chair of the Standards Committee. And last slide, please. And this is simply changing the guidance note to match what we discussed at the start in relation to transparency, so that the public are aware that it isn't just this dip sampling of certain standards decisions, that the Standards Committee are going to be aware of all decisions. Thank you, Chair. If you have any more questions,
thank you, Sean. Frank.
Just, it's on the general heading of conduct reporting process and code of conduct. Is the one thing that I think some parishes would think is that in the end, where are the teeth that belong to the code of conduct, and what can be done if somebody continually breaks code of conduct?
It's a very good point, and it's something which has been frustrating monitoring officers, members, officers since 2011, when the Localism Act was brought in, and the only official sanction under that act is that we can censor a member, which essentially is write a letter to them, and that is it. Our code of conduct says that if you don't comply with a recommendation, that in itself is a breach. but then we got this circle of, well, if I'm not going to comply with the censure, I probably don't care about what a further finding of a breach. So it is a very unsatisfactory situation. In particular, 20 miles across the border that way, it would be completely different, where the sanctions are you could be removed as a member for up to 6 months if you breach the code, depending on the severity of the breach. But there are proper sanctions. Our sanctions are currently the process in itself. I think that the majority of members probably don't wish to go through this, don't wish to be before a standards panel, which is usually held in public. That, of course, that is a sanction to some members, but not others. But no, Councillor, you're correct. There are no official sanctions. We can make recommendations, and then certain bodies can try to enforce that. For example, we could recommend someone's removed from a particular panel, but then that would be up to the group as a decision to decide whether or not they wish to enforce that. So it's as a council and as a committee, it's been unsatisfactory for over a decade now.
Sean, are you aware of any pressure within the LGA, either from officers or councillors, to get a change to that legislation?
There was a report that went back from the Standards Commission back to the central government about 2 years ago, and the response back from the government was they had no current plans to make any changes to the regime.
Do you think that with a new chairman of the LGA who is looking to do things differently, particularly if the government colour changes to the same as his colour, do you think there might be some possibility of making more lobbying now?
In fairness to the LGA, I think they are on board with this. I think they understand that there does need to be changes, but unfortunately, it's up to parliamentary time and for Parliament to legislate on that. And until that happens, the current state of affairs will continue.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, Mark. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I've got three points, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Firstly, the ironic situation. What if the complaint is against a councillor who's on the panel? And then second one, so what is the procedure? I mean, if complaints against somebody who's on the panel. Second one, what's the procedure if a councillor leaves, is no longer a member, but then gets elected at a future time? Will their code of conduct record be redisplayed, be returned, and made visible again? So, because you mentioned that it'll be removed.
Yes.
Once they left, but if they came back, and they do come back. Third one, what was discussed is that I'm not quite sure on procedure, but are the chairs of committees allowed to remove councillors from the committee? So if they were notified of the code of conduct issue or breach, is it up to their discretion to remove, if they wanted to, remove somebody from their committee? That's my third one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take them in reverse order. So in relation to the chairs, the chairs only have the authority that's granted to them in the Constitution. So the chair's powers are nothing more than what's in the Constitution, and typically it's in relation to conducting the meeting and ensure the efficient discharge of a meeting. And that is it. There is additional powers in relation to consultation, which are usually quite bespoke. So, for example, one of the recommendations up there was the MO in consultation with the chair, so that they are quite bespoke additional powers. But there are no powers under the Constitution for a chairman to remove a member from a particular committee. It would be only full council can remove that particular member from a committee. And in relation to a subcommittee, for example, it would only be the members of this committee that could remove someone from their own subcommittee. So this committee would vote on who are the three members. I think that answers that question there. In relation to a member who leaves and then comes back again, no, it's a good point. Currently, as proposed, it says that it remains until they leave. So, I guess for a county, for at the borough level stage, you're talking about 4 years later, presumably, or 3 years later. But I guess at the parish council stage, parish councillors do get re-elected or co-opted quite sooner. So if the panel would like that to remain or change to reflect that, then I'm quite happy to make that recommendation there. That is more about our guidance. So that is a good point. So what the proposal could be is that it would remain for 6 years from the date, and provided that the councillor still is a councillor. So that would be the wording, the changing to that proposal.
Yeah, I think, Sean, if you just take that away and work out something appropriate.
But I understand what the point you're making, and we can quite easily change the wording so it would pick up the instances where a member leaves and then is co-opted in 6 months' time back onto the same parish council. So I think if you're happy with a 6 year should how it should be, then we'll make sure it fits the 6 year, irrespective of how many times they go and come back again.
There was a sorry, Mark, you carry on.
I was just going to say they may not return to the same parish council. They may move next door. Has happened also. Yeah,
I'll pick that one up. The last one was the complaints about a member of the panel, which again is another good point. There's two options to that. The Audit and Governance Committee could reconvene again and to appoint another standards panel, so you can select another 3 members to act on that panel. The alternative, which is that you have a panel of 3 members, but you also select 2 reserves in effect. Now, I know this council doesn't have reserves, but that's within your gift to say, well, actually, they're the 3 members who appear, but if any of those 3 aren't able to, well, even if they're not available for a particular date, these are the 2 members that would come back onto that. So this will have to go to full council for them to approve anyway. But if that's that would certainly be a better way than this committee having to well, I would hope that a complaint against a member of the standards panel wouldn't happen that often, but you never know, and it would cause delay. You are right. But I guess that we would know fairly early on in the process to have this meeting to reconvene it again. It's up to you. It's up to you, Chair. Either way would work. So you could have the 3 plus 2, as 2 as reserves, and in a way that might improve understanding amongst all the members, not relying just on the 3.
Anybody have a particular view? Peter?
I think the 2 reserves is a good plan because they could be the substitutes in the eventuality of somebody not being able to attend a meeting.
Yeah, given that we're only going to have the councillors voting, we really need a reserve to make sure we've always got 3 that can vote. So I agree with that too.
If you can make those changes, then
happy to make those changes. So 2 substitutes should the main panel not be be ready.
Yeah, I think my preference is that if we nominate 2 people, it would be good if those were available, and rather than people think, oh, well, there's a reserve, so I don't have to bother. I'm quite keen on the people who are receiving the updates from you every time there's a decision. Those people remain the same throughout the whole period. Maybe it's just the standards panel itself which might need the substitutes. Sean?
I can change it so there's 2 substitutes only substitute if there's a conflict or if there is a complaint against that individual. So, as you say, it's not optional. If you are on the standards panel, then it's that commitment, so happy to go either way. But what you're saying, Chair, makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think limiting it in some way would be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me,
So
Chair.
Mark, keep going.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. You bring up a good point, though. It's also about quorate. How does it need to be 3 councillors in order to be quorate? Because standards, code of conduct, that's potentially making a big impact on someone's life. So, are we saying there must be 3 councillors? And if so, then we do have to make provisions for sickness and absence.
Sure.
It does have to be 3, and it's right because as I said, these are important decisions, so it should be by the 3 peers making those decisions. I shall take that on board and put those words in relation to sickness, conflict, complaint. If the member cannot act, essentially, is the reason why the member cannot be on that panel.
Thank you. Frank.
Well, I think Sean just answered it, but just in case there was an issue of conflict, were you covering that if there was a member of the standards panel would declare an interest if the person that was before them, he knew them, and knew them in a different aspect?
Yes, I'll cover that off with conflicts of interest as well. So it's that wide. So it picks up the element, the times that you can't sit for any particular reason, which would include a conflict of interest.
Okay, just a couple of comments. I think the idea of having permanent people, so each year there are 2 people assigned to the standards panel together with the chair. I'd like to think that those 2 changed regularly. Every year it is a different 2, or every year 1 resigns or we get 1 change. So everybody has the opportunity of being on that, and we share the experience. That's my thinking. It's not totally written into what it is, and I don't propose any change. Sean, keep it as it is. My other observation is that we haven't had any standards panel referrals so far. Is that unusual? Are things going particularly smoothly at the moment, or can we look forward to a flurry of standard panels soon?
Mr. Chairman, didn't we have one?
It wasn't a standards panel to look at a particular appeal. The meeting was to assess the previous cases. I'm just thinking of a case where there is a code of conduct complaint.
Thank you, Chair. I hope that if the full council approves the recommendations, so we can share all the information with the standards panel, you can come to your own conclusion whether or not there's been enough or there should be more, and that's kind of one of the benefits of what this proposal is going to be. But certainly since I've been here since February time, there hasn't been a need to call a members panel.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, a members hearing panel.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, comments? No, thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out in the papers. Sean, you've noted the couple of changes which we want to make. So subject to those changes, is everybody in favour of this recommendation? All right, thank you. And any indication of when this goes to full council, Sean? Does it wait till the AGM in May, or does it go before then?
I'm going to speak to the MO because there's a couple of changes which have to be made to the constitution. We're thinking that we should try and get them in one paper rather than drip feeding them to council. I'll speak to the MO and I'll let you know, Chair.
Thank you. So item 11 is the work programme. Jen, you've tabled something this afternoon. The next meeting is the 30th of January. There are 8 items on that, which happens to include the code of conduct for councillors, 6 monthly update. It'll definitely contain the value for money statement. We might end up with, I think I'm hopeful we get the risk registers approach to strategic risk management, because that slipped a number of times. Anybody have any particular views? Are we missing anything?
Can I just ask
Peter, yeah.
silly point, I expect. What's the difference between the external audit progress report and annual report? Items 2 and 3 in January.
Rachel, do you want to deal with that one?
I think that's a legacy item from last year when the external audit overran, and they did not conclude their audit. So I think that one can be removed from the agenda, and we'll just be having the annual audit report.
Obviously a very good question there, Peter. Thank you. Taking one item off already. Okay, Jen, any thoughts, comments? No? Everybody happy with that? So that's agreed. Date of the next meeting is Tuesday the 30th of January. I see no one with any reasons why we should close this meeting. So thank you for attending this meeting. I will ask for the live stream to be switched off. Thank you.